Greetings everybody, welcome back. You are watching the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage here on YouTube, and I am making a video today. I'm going through this machine. This of course is the Sears Warner machine that I was able to get at I guess you could say it was the leftovers of a garage sale or neighborhood garage sale that was held where people donated items for the sale, and the money went to a cat rescue. And so this machine, I paid for the machine, and that money went to the rescue. So I wanted to kind of go through the machine. One of the things I've mentioned to you all in the past is that if you are just now getting interested in the hobby of restoring vintage sewing machines, or you're just looking for a vintage machine to use and you want to fix it up, maybe to sew with, that typically Singers, or if not a Singer brand machine, a Singer dedicated straight stitch can be a great machine to restore. You can get lots of parts, but you don't have to have a Singer, because this is, of course, is a Japanese-made clone. We call them Class 15 or Singer clones. You hear different ways to describe them, but the machines are essentially a copy of the Singer 15 class sewing machine, and you'll know that because it'll be a dedicated straight stitch machine, and it will have a tension assembly that faces on the to the left on the left side. Sorry, I've got the machine turned around right now, so I know I'm pointing toward the right here, but I've got the machine backwards. So today I thought I'd go in and show you why I think this is a great candidate, whether it's a Singer or one of these department store brands or another brand of a clone, because these machines are simpler. That doesn't mean they can't be problematic to restore. Any machine can be, and it's very difficult. I can't always say that one particular model will always be less involved. You could get a machine like this and it could just have all kinds of problems. But typically there's less to go through, right? If you compare this, for example, to, let's say you compare that to a Singer 401A, that is a magnificent machine with a lot of features, a lot of built-in features, and more complexity. And you could get one that runs fine. It requires very little effort. But, you know, on the average, you will find that a dedicated straight stitch machine such as this should be more friendly to you, especially if you're just now getting your feet wet and getting started looking at vintage sewing machines. So what I'm going to do here, I want to take the motor. I want to get a little better access to the motor here. So I'm going to take my trusty screwdriver tip set, and I'm going to need a fairly large one for this because I've got the big bolt. This bolt, of course, holds the bracket, which is holding the motor, to mount it to the machine. And you will know, you'll be able to tell pretty quickly if the bolt's ever been adjusted. I assume it has, because this machine has a stretch belt on it. Sometimes you will see a belt like this. One of the ways you'll know them is they're made of rubber, but okay, yeah, this has been taken off before, and I assumed that it did not come standard with this stretch belt. And those of you who know my channel or know me and my approach to sewing machines, you will know I'm not a fan of stretch belts. They can work. They're sometimes called universal belts, and they're called that because they are designed, think of them kind of like a big, thick rubber band. And because I say that because, see if I can get the belt to come out of there. All right. So the belt is going to be round, sort of like almost like a treadle belt. Now most sewing machine belts, when you pull on them, they will barely flex at all. But when I pull on this belt, it's like a bungee cord, right? And because of that, they're called universal because within a range, they will fit different sewing machines that might otherwise require different size belts. But the problem with this, of course, is you lose power. Okay, so some of the motor's power is absorbed into that belt and you don't get as much punching power. They obviously work. People have used them, but I would rather not have one. And because standard sewing machine belts on vintage machines, they typically, once you put a new one on, you're going to be good to go for a while in most cases. So, okay, and you guys can see, I don't know, I think you can see down here, of course, I have in this late afternoon light, if I zoom in, you'll see some of the filth that I wasn't able to get to with the vacuum the other day. I had the motor on here, so I'll be getting that taken care of. But right now, my focus is on the motor. Now, because this is a dual plug power cord setup, which is very common. Almost every Japanese machine from the vintage era has these. I'm going to unplug the lead cord from the motor, as you can see, is coming out of the motor here. Has a nice rubber bushing. Always like to see that. Usually you'll see rubber or plastic, and this is the plug. And I'm just going to look at it. I'm looking at it, looking for any cracks. Because I don't know where this machine was stored, but the cord is soft, it's flexible, and I do not see, when I gently turn it, I'm not going to smash it, but if I gently curve it, I see no cracking, and that's a good thing. So, what else am I wanting to look at here? I'm inspecting this motor is kind of interesting. It is this motor would have been made here in Canada, this particular one, because if they're made in Japan, they'll almost always tell you that they're made in Japan. And it's interesting because this machine, this motor rather, reminds me of some of the Pfaff German motors that I have shown more recently on the channel, because they have this very large bushing, and you can actually see, if I turn, I don't know if you guys can see that, but you can see the drive shaft of the motor's turning here, right? And then on the other side, now I do not see an oiling hole. I don't see a hole where I might oil this piece here. So I'm going to want to get this clean. First of all, I have one of the things you'll see if you look at the motor, there's some soot here, right? And that soot, I believe, is not something that was pulled toward the motor. I think it's basically the motor brushes are on this end, right? And so there's a fan that's pulling air, and I believe the air is being pulled out this way, I believe. And you can see I can clean that soot off. But what I really want to know is the condition of my brushes. And you know, the brushes in a motor, unless they have been replaced, and some of you may get a vintage machine that was used so much that they actually had to replace the brushes, and that's okay. That's great that they were replaced, but that happens very seldom with brushes that I inspect. Usually the brushes are either very worn or barely worn at all. The point being here is that when you, I think I need a little bit bigger, yeah, that's a little bit better, screwdriver tip there. You always want to size the screwdriver tip to as close to the head of this is like a plastic cap here. But any time you're turning a screw, the better you size your tip to what you're turning, the least you're less likely to strip it. Now, again, as always, remember these brush caps have springs behind them. So don't just turn it and wait for it because it'll go flying. You don't want to hit it. You don't want to have it hit you in the face or the eye, and you don't want to lose it. So I'm just going to hold it. I'm turning it, but holding it down, and there's the spring. And look at that. This one, instead of just plastic, it has a little brass inset. How's that for fancy? Uh-oh. And I have a spring, but I do not have a brush. Actually, I'm pretty sure I probably have a brush, but I don't have it it did not come out. Sometimes a spring will not pull the brush out. Sometimes the brushes get sticky. And I've got the motor here, and I can, different ways of trying to go about this. There, I just kind of gently tapped it. I didn't whack it on anything, and there it came. There came our brush. Sometimes the graphite that comes off of these brushes as they wear, it can kind of, it can get a little sticky sometimes, but it's usually not that difficult. Now, this is the end of the brush that was, yeah. One end, this is the top end that was never on the motor surface. This is the end. Now, some brushes have a little indentation where the spring can latch on. This particular one does not. It's possible that this is a new brush, but you know what? Given how lovely this machine is, it's possible. And this is at least, I'm going to say, almost a half an inch. It's almost a half inch long. So that's a very healthy brush. That's going to last a long time. So I've got the curve. There's a curve there. It obviously had some use, so the brush would just be flat, the part that touched the commutator of the motor. So what does that tell us? That tells me, and this is a guess, that this machine did not get much use. Doesn't mean it wasn't a great machine. It just means whoever had it either maybe they didn't care for it how it worked, or maybe they just didn't like sewing. That is also possible. It's kind of interesting. You can tell a lot about a sewing machine's life by when you go to inspect it. And of course, I have not plugged this machine in. I have not begun to test it out yet. My approach is to, you can see the black, the carbon or the graphite that's the residue off the commutator of the motor. That's coming off. And I'm using 99% isopropyl alcohol for those of you who are curious as to, hey, what you can use a dry I almost said Q-tip. Q-tip's a brand name. You can use a cotton swab that's dry, and that will pull some of it off, but I like the 99% isopropyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol, 99% concentration. I want to be very specific there. That is similar to electronics cleaners. Not exactly the same, but it's electronics cleaner has a very high concentration of alcohol in it. And the main point there, I believe, is to say that that's too fat. You want to trying to put a little bit of a wider. Normally these precision tips are great, but I'm actually wanting to sort of soften the tip there a little bit for what I'm doing here. You'll find that the alcohol is a great cleaner for the commutators and other parts of your machine as well, just not for paint. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this in this light, but what's happening is as I'm putting these cotton swabs down, and then I'm coming back with another fresh cotton swab dipped in the isopropyl alcohol. Make sure you use 99% alcohol, because if you use one of those in the pharmacy that it's lower concentration, like people sometimes use on their skin, that has too much water, and you do not want water near a motor. As I keep doing this, what I'm after here is it's starting to get less black and more of a gray color, because I'm gradually getting that buildup of graphite off, and that's the goal. And that way, when the brush does hit the commutator, when it touches it, and the motor's running, the motor should run more efficiently. Those of you who know my channel know that this is my approach. Early in my sewing machine restoration journey, I used to take the motor apart and sand the commutator. I don't do that anymore, because I think that in order to get the commutator shiny like a new copper penny, In order to do that, you end up running the risk of losing, taking off too much copper. And even if your motor runs, you really shorten the life of it. I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze there. I don't mind doing it. I actually would like to preserve as much of the original motor as I can. Because yes, it's great to have modern reproduction motors. Okay, so let's see. I'll show you one of the first cotton swab ends. The one here on the right. If I can get this to show up. The one on the right was one of the first I put in there. Look how black it is. And then if you see this one here, there's barely any on it. Okay, so that suits me just fine. I'm pleased and happy with that. And so I don't confuse my filthy cotton swabs with any future clean ones, I'll set those aside. Okay, so I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to be putting the brush back in. Always make sure you know which way the curve on your brush is. Unless you're putting in a new brush, you're going to have a curve. There's not much of one here, but there is a curve. The flat end is going to be on the top because it never touched the commutator. The commutator is a ring, right, and it spins, and the brush touches it. Now, because the curve is actually on, you can see this. If you're not sure, look it in the light, and you'll be able to see what is convex and what's concave. And you want to make sure that the curvature is on the same plane or axis as the commutator, right? So the commutator is going to be running in this on this axis right here, okay? And that's where I want my curve of the brush. And that way, my brush and my motor are going to be happier when they start working together again. Now, I'm just putting the spring in here like that. And then this is another time you want to pay attention. There's a place for your spring to go. In this case, usually there's an indentation underneath the brush cap, and there's one here, conveniently made of brass. They spared no expense. Now, when you're putting your brush cap back in, easier to see that way. When you're putting your brush cap back in, let me come back. Whoops. Let's see here. I'm going to take my brush out and show it to you again. To make sure that I was actually showing it to you. Okay, so again, my commutator is going to be moving in this direction, and I've got the flat end of the brush, and then the end of the brush that has a curve, and I want to make sure that the curve is lined up with my commutator, and it is. So it goes in like that. The spring goes in. There's nothing for the spring to attach to with the brush. That's okay. Not all of them are set up that way. And again, I'm going to take the recess in the bottom. You can see there with the brass. Sometimes it's just black plastic, but this one is brass. And I'm going to make sure that I get the spring wants to seat in there. Now, when you go to put the cap back on, do not push down and let go. I know this may seem obvious. You think, well, yeah, but if you don't, just remember to hold it, because it's going to go flying, and you don't want it to go flying at you, and you don't want it to go flying into something like an HVAC register or somewhere where it will be lost. Okay? Now, once I've got my screwdriver bit on there, I'm going to turn. When you start to turn anything that's threaded, in this case, it's a plastic brush cap. Okay, it's not made of metal, it's plastic. So its threads are even more fragile than the threads of a metal bolt or screw, which can also be cross-threaded. So when I start turning this, right, as soon as I start turning it, it wants to turn just, well, it did want to turn. Let's see. When you start turning, it should turn smoothly. At the very beginning, when you start to turn any bolt, or in this case the brush cap, anything that's threaded, If it resists you early on, you need to stop, because it's telling you, hey, I'm not seated properly, and you're cross-threading it. You're going to cause problems with either the thread in the motor or more likely the bolt, or in this case the brush cap. So it's turning smoothly, and I'm just going to keep turning, and then pretty suddenly, without very little lead up time, it's going to snug, right? It's going to turn, and then it'll just want to stop. And when it says stop, you stop. Don't keep going. And it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be fine. All right, so we've cleaned our commutator, and well, while I have the motor, I could do this with the motor on the machine, but while I've got it here, it's perfectly fine to do this. What am I doing? I'm going to take yet another cotton swab, and I'm going to clean an area that you definitely want to clean. This cotton swab may or may not be too big for this, but I've got my pulley, right? Remember, the motor has a pulley, and that pulley has a groove, and that groove you want to be clean. I don't see anything particularly dirty, but you can't always see old grease or oil. It doesn't always look crappy like it sometimes does. And so I'm going to take this here. There we go. And I'm turning in the direction, that it spins when the motor's running. And you can see, I don't know if you guys can see, but there's some old oil that managed to get on here. And so I just want to make sure that I'm getting as much of this as I can. And it's not so much that I'm trying to shine it. In fact, you do not want to put polish on this thing. Now, if you have a pulley that has rust, you may have to take some emery paper, very fine sandpaper, and yes, you could, in theory, if you needed to get the rust off with some metal polish, you could polish it, but then don't put your belt on. You're going to have to go back with the alcohol and pull off any of the residue of the polish, right? Because polishes and wax leave a residue, and sometimes that's a good thing. It seals metal from future corrosion for a while anyway. But because our belt is going here, we want friction. We don't want any slippage. So again, I didn't have any corrosion here, and I didn't have to put any polish there. So, and of course you will see a little bolt here. That is for any time you would need to remove the pulley for whatever reason. I don't need to. Looks perfectly fine to me. And I don't know if my drive shaft has anything on it, but just in case, I'm going to take one of my fine pointed, if it'll go in there, yeah. I'm going to take one of my precision tip here. Oh wow, look at that. Because some of that carbon that had come off of the, that got on the motor because the fan was blowing it there, it actually also got on the shaft, and I don't want that there. The last thing I want is for the shaft to have something gumming it up or causing friction. You don't want that. You want the shaft to spin beautifully inside its bushing. A bushing is like a collar. Some machines have bearings. I don't know that there's a bearing in here. I believe it's a bushing. It's kind of a beefy bushing, so I could be wrong. It could in fact be a bearing. But whichever the machine uses, it's there to help this shaft spin, because that's the whole point of oiling the shaft. Now, because I do not have an access point for, let me finish, get a little ahead of myself here. Let me make sure I go ahead and keep going, trying to clean up some of this excess graphite dust, carbon dust. It's not really harming anything out here, but it doesn't look all that great. And hey, we want our machines to look nice, right? I assume all of you do, as nice as they can look. Some vintage machines have a lot of patina. Some do. This machine has almost no patina other than some amber-looking old oil. How it got there, I don't know. But it, I think that whether your machine is kind of had a hard life and looks kind of ragamuffin, or maybe your machine is more like this one, has gorgeous paint. Whatever the case is, you want to clean it up as best you can. One of my viewers, some time ago, I kept, thinking, I was asking, should I use the word restoration or renovation? And they said, how about conservation? And I really like that, because very often when you have something that is vintage and you don't want to, you're not customizing it. I don't strip and spray paint my machine's custom colors. There are people who do. In fact, there are people who have that as a service and they offer it. And there are some machine owners, they really like that and they're willing to pay. You may have seen, sometimes you'll see, for example, Singer featherweights. The classic color of the featherweight obviously is black, but there are people who say, you know what, I want, a candy apple red featherweight or whatever. And you know what? Hey, it's their machine. And some of the people who do this work do great work and they're beautiful. But I am a conservator, if you will, when it comes to things that are vintage. I want them to look as close as is possible to the way they did when they were new. And many of them are not going to look exactly like they did, but that's okay. No harm in that. Okay, so the motor has, as far as I can see here, has had all of its filth on the outside taken off. Now, I'm going to do, I'm still working on the machine here, but I'm going to take sewing machine oil, and I am going to use that sewing machine oil, and I'm going to place it. Now, because I don't have an access hole here, I am going to find this part of the shaft right here. This is where the shaft, the drive shaft, or the motor shaft of the sewing machine motor goes into the bushing. And I'm going to put just 2 drops, no more. Don't do any more than that, okay? Normally, if you are doing, say, once a year you want to oil the bushing of the motor, you put 1 drop and no more. You do not need more than 1. In this particular instance, I chose to add 2 because I'm pretty sure that this motor has either never been oiled since it left the factory or it's been a long time. Because even sewing machine service centers, many of them may not even know that the motor can be oiled, right? So that's a major. You don't have a ton of friction points for lubrication in an electric motor, but this is one of them. And of course, on this side, right, on the other side, here's the other end of the shaft, and I'm going to put a 1 and 2. And that's it. And I'm going to turn, I'm going to spin, I'm turning, I've got my hand here on the pulley on this side, and I'm just turning it to let some of that oil work its way. And the oil, what the goal is here is for the oil to sit between the bushing and the shaft, okay? The oil does not need to go in the motor. Do not do that. No. All of these holes that you see are for air. They are not for oil. I have shown in other videos, sometimes you'll have an electric sewing machine motor that has a very specific hole for lubrication. This one doesn't. And if yours doesn't, don't make one up. Do not do that. Okay? So, and then over here, when I put the oil here, I was doing the same thing. I want lubrication for this shaft, motor shaft, to be between the shaft and inside just this section here, which is its bushing, unless there are bearings there. But most of these motors did not come with bearings. There are sewing motors, particularly industrial motors, that have bearings, but those are much more expensive motors. These motors were specified for domestic sewing machine use. Okay, so while I have my motor unmounted, I'm going to unplug this other the other half of my of my dual outlet or dual block power cord, as these are sometimes called. And of course, yes, this is the original because it is brass. Today, you don't really see a lot of brass when it comes to electrical plugs. They've gone to something, of course, they've gone to something cheaper. You knew they would, right? All right, so what am I doing? I'm going to take some of the soapy water, just like I used when I was cleaning the rest of the machine. But of course, the first thing I'm going to do is get my motor out of harm's way. We do not want the motor anywhere near the soapy water. No, no. All right. So again, I put like 2 drops of dishwashing detergent. It can be mild. We don't need, we're not cleaning grease off of a garage floor here. We're just basically, I want to get this soapy water acts like a lubricant, so that when I now go to brush away this really kind of gritty film, looks like more than just dust. Yes, the soap will help break up some of the old oil if we're lucky, but it's also going to allow me to wipe away the dirt without scratching the paint. Now you may look at this and think, oh, that's just a bunch of hoo-ha, and you know, do you really need to do that? That's up to you. You know, how important is it to you, and how much of in a hurry are you? I would suggest that getting in a hurry is never good when you're doing something like sewing machine restoration. It's just not. And when sewing machines will sometimes have these little nooks and crannies that are a little bit weird to get to, and in those situations, you can take, just like you use with alcohol, you can take your cotton swab and put it down in the soapy water, and you can get into areas like this, and look at that. Look what I pulled off. That's just with soap and water. That's not even a special, you can see that, any kind of special cleaner. Now, sometimes you may run into something, a stain that's more stubborn, and you know how that is. Sometimes things come off, but I always like to use the most gentle thing that works first, and then if you're not having any luck, you can decide how much more aggressive do you want to be with the cleaning. And the more aggressive you are, the harsher the chemical, the more apt you are to damage it, and that's just the way it is. Sorry, that's why I always like to tread carefully, because once you damage something, you might be able to fix it, but do you really want to create in the effort to save time? You could end up costing yourself a lot more work and fuss. So, and I'm just taking that soapy water, and again, I'm getting sort of a brown residue coming off on the cotton swab, and that's basically just old oil. I don't know if prior owners weren't sure what they were supposed to do, and they thought that they were going to oil their machines, and they did, and whew, it's like I said, sewing machines, because they've been through so many decades and sometimes many owners, sometimes not. You never know what happens to them. I mean, it's just a testament to how they were engineered and built. The fact that they still are willing to run in spite of all the just bizarre places that people put them, they store them. But you know something? I've also noticed that when I get a machine, and as I often do from an estate sale, and it was a one owner, or maybe the person's just downsizing it. They're still living. They're trying to downsize. It is amazing the difference in how the machine is taken care of. People get attached to things that they've had, and for some people, they've had them all their lives. They also remember, as I've shared with you all on a number of occasions, the original owners, they know how much those things were how long it took to pay off their sewing machine. So they understand that, you know, there was a time when not every consumer item, but a lot of consumer items, you know, you took care of your stuff because you paid a lot of money for it. While I'm here, while I'm at it, I'm going to go back up to this little label. You know, I could be really aggressive with it and get some kind of piece of plastic to scrape it off, but no, I don't want to scrape this gorgeous paint. I'm just blotting it with this soapy water, and it's weak. You know, these stickers are basically paper and glue, and I don't know who invented the cheap sticker that never wants to peel off, but I'm willing to bet every one of my viewers at some point in your life, if not more than once, you've had to deal with a stubborn sticker. I got one right up here, and there it goes. So I had gotten it soaked yesterday, and so it'll come off. Just be patient. Your machine will appreciate it. All right, so again, I have essentially, let's not get that water very close to that. I have essentially cleaned and serviced the motor for my machine. And all in about however long this has taken me, 36 minutes into this video. And if I were doing it and not showing it to you all, I would have already been done. So, I like to obviously I like to talk, and I like to talk to you about what I'm doing, because many of you, you know, you're doing this for the first time, or you're discovering vintage sewing machines for the first time. And then some of you are pros. Some of you have been watching my channel for years, and I'm so grateful that you come back. I always try to find something new. This is the first Sears Warner machine I've ever seen. I've never seen a color quite like this. Maybe the Fofs, some of the Fofs get close to that. But anyway, going to continue on in next couple of videos. We'll be going around, and we have yet to explore the light bulb, because many machines have different setups for how their light bulbs get attached, which light bulbs they take, and we'll take a look at that. And we'll do it next time. So, thank you all for tuning in here and watching me clean another motor from another machine from the past. I often think that prior generations, I have so much respect for them, because the vast majority of them were not wealthy people. They couldn't just go around buying anything they wanted, but they saved up their money, or they financed, and they took care of their stuff. And because they paid so much, they expected their stuff to be serviceable, and they expected the retailer and or the manufacturer to stand behind them. Speaking of standing behind, I appreciate those of you who support this channel. If you have not, please consider donating. You can click on the links that say Buy Me a Coffee. Every one of the videos and the home channel have them. It'll take you right to my own Buy Me a Coffee page, which looks just like this channel. And you can donate to whatever level you would like, because it helps me. It helps put gas in the car. And I often either, if I bid on a machine, I have to go. Sometimes the auctions are a good ways away, or I see something online and I'll travel an hour to go and to rescue a machine, bring it back, and then bring it here to the channel, show all of you the techniques I'm using, or the techniques I'm still learning 12 years later. And you know, we want to get as many of these machines rescued as possible, and any support that you can give would certainly help with that. And hopefully those of you who are far away from where I am here in Canada, you are also learning to restore your machine, and maybe you'll get the you'll get the bug for this hobby too. I hope so, because there are millions of these machines and they need rescuing. Thank you all again for watching. We'll see you next time.